know that you're not as cool as you used to be. That's
the coolness. You know what makes me cool? At least it used to be in punk rock scene. I never got tattoos.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Everybody was getting tattoos, and I would always get on my punk rock high horse and say, "What's with all this conformity with you?"
This conformity.
I'm Arizona Family political editor Dennis Welch.
Dennis, fake news Welch. Try to tell the truth.
And this is the Politics Unplugged podcast.
Dennis, if you have a problem with substance abuse, I am more than willing to talk to you anytime you need.
All right, welcome back to another edition of Politics Unplugged, the podcast edition. And with me today, I've got two political experts, Lorna Romero Ferguson, Republican side of things, and Tony Cani, the Democrat side of things. It's such a busy week. We decided to just bring in a couple of folks like yourself and just kind of recap some of the news this past week, because there's just so much of it. And I want to start with the presidential visit. Joe Biden comes to Arizona. He wants to honor the late Senator John McCain, his old friend, but he also uses the occasion to attack MAGA supporters, Trump supporters, saying that they are a threat to democracy. Want to get your guys' opinion on that. First of all, does this kind of thing work? Because I'm thinking that, he wants to come out here and he's using this as an opportunity, to speak about, obviously, McCain and make this big announcement that they're going to build this library, but using it as an opportunity to speak to anti-Trump voters. Is this something that works, Tony?
Well, I think it works. And if you look at the 2022 election and you go into even some of the competitive Republican-leaning districts, like say District 17, which is the one that's in Oro Valley down there, the anti-MAGA candidates lost. They lost. And so I do think that there is, especially because I think we're more aware in Arizona of the stuff that's going on with the MAGA anti-democracy people, all the way from all the coverage of the audit to these never-ending lawsuits. And so I think that there's people who are just fed up. And so I think that there's a political reason for it. And also, it's good for the president to speak out against the types of threats that we're facing in Arizona. So,
and Lorna, let me ask you too. I mean, you've also got a really interesting take on this. You were the comms director on Senator McCain's last Senate race. Obviously, a big part of this was this dedication of this library that's going to be used. They're going to use federal funding to build this library near Papago Park.
Yeah.
You've been in the middle of some of this stuff. I mean, what do you know about these anti-Trump voters? Are they going to vote for? Would they vote for someone like Biden again, or would they just sit home this time?
Well, I think it's really going to depend on what Biden does between now and next fall, right? I mean, the economy has not helped him whatsoever, and he hasn't had the best track record. So I think when you looked at the last presidential election, there were folks who were in the anti-Trump camp that said, hey, we want somebody who's much more of the adult in the room, right? And kind of fell into the type of politics that moderate Republicans and independents in Arizona were much more used to with like a John McCain. Fast forward, Joe Biden hasn't really done himself any favors, right? And so I think he's probably lost some support of those types of Republicans that crossed over and even independents that typically lean Republican. So he has a lot of work to do. And so I think with him coming to Arizona, doing the McCain announcement, I think he's trying to lay the groundwork of what kind of moderate message he would try to bring during his presidential campaign. But his policies also have to couple with that moving forward, right? If there are no improvements in the economy, that's not going to help him. And so I think you're going to find a situation where these Republicans who there's not a scenario that they're going to vote for Trump if he's the nominee, and then their other choice is Biden. They might just sit it out. So it's really going to be up to Biden on what he's going to do to appeal to these voters, while also not alienating his far left supporters.
Yeah, that's important too. I mean, the people who decide not to participate could be just as influential as those who do, because we're in a state where that presidential election was decided by 10,000 votes in 2020. How do you think the message was? Because to me, beyond the McCain stuff out there, which he spoke about his old friend, he got really emotional at talking about that. But that speech, other than that, when he was talking about threats to democracy and American institutions and the American democracy and the way of life, it was kind of a dark speech.
It was, but I think that I think that the threat is real, and the president sees it and he's speaking about it. And when he comes to Arizona, where so much of even the January 6th stuff started here with the Stop the Steal and Mark Fincham and all this stuff. I just think that it was an appropriate thing for him to do. And, I will say one thing. I was the deputy on the campaign last time, and we only got him here once. We only got one trip. We thought we might get a second, but we only got the one. He's already been here twice.
As many months.
This year.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so, I do think that he understands that he needs to be speaking to Arizona voters, because, one thing is there are things that he can really brag about and be proud of when it comes to sort of infrastructure and prescription drug prices and these things, but it's not breaking through in the way I think that he needs it to. And so this type of retail campaigning is going to happen in our state.
And one of the big criticisms was he didn't go down to the border. As Tony was saying, we're probably going to see a lot more of the president this time around than last, but he's got to go to the border, right, Lorna?
Yeah, he does. And he should have before this trip. And it should have been much more of a priority from his administration. I understand the delicate nature of this trip because it was more focused on the dedication to the late Senator John McCain, and trying to throw in a border tour visit. I understand that probably, from a media perspective, probably wouldn't have been the best thing to couple together, right? But that didn't preclude him from doing that visit beforehand, right? And so you see numbers skyrocketing. You see no action from the federal government. You've seen, more attention being drawn to the border because of what's happening down there from, local residents talking about it. And then it just seems like Biden's ignoring it, right? And so this is going to be his Achilles heel for him and other Democrats running, for office this cycle in Arizona of, what's going to be their message to Arizona voters, because people are fed up. They just feel completely ignored, and it's just a failure of his administration. So he's going to continue to be criticized, and it's well-deserved.
And do you think we'll see Biden at the border during this campaign cycle?
I bet you he probably will go down. I don't know that for sure, of course, but, It's this weird litmus test that is it's become this litmus test where you have Republican candidates who love to go down to the border and they wear the same jacket, and they've got, I joke all the time, if I really wanted to make money, I'd get a little TV studio down there together so I can videotape them for these stunt visits. But, people do want to see him down there, but there just is no real movement on real solutions to the crisis at the border, right? There isn't on the Republican side or the Democratic side, and it's because there needs to be a way for people to work together to get this done. And with the filibuster in place and all this other stuff, it's difficult to see a way that any sort of meaningful, comprehensive immigration reform can get done.
And before we move on from this topic, I do want to get Lorna's take on this. I'd mentioned earlier you worked comms for McCain on his last Senate campaign, and what do you think? What's your takeaway from this dedication of this library? Because McCain has become this symbol for politicians of the past when they used to work together by bipartisanship, and today, even 5 years after his death, I mean, he is seen as there's someone who would fight against Trump. He's an anti-Trump guy. I mean, so what do you take away from this dedication from the week, and what do you think about the whole thing with the library and stuff?
Well, I think the library is an appropriate way to honor the legacy of Senator McCain in Arizona. I mean, he was such an institution, and you see, just with his death, what kind of void it created in the state, right? And there was nobody, whether Republican or Democrat, that could step in and kind of fill that role. And like you said, it's an end of an era in terms of elected leaders who put service before self, right? And were willing to, buck their party and work across the aisle on policies that they believed were right for the state and for the country, right? Now everyone is just so entrenched in their party politics and sticking to their talking points and hating the other side versus working with the other side, right? And so my hope is that this is kind of a reminder of the Arizona that we used to be, right? And the direction that Arizona should go in by reflecting on the past, kind of talking about what the future should be. I remain optimistic. I know that there are Republicans and Democrats out there that are more moderate in the middle that exist, that are just kind of frightened and fed up with the state of politics right now. And I'm hoping that they will take a leadership position and kind of speak out and get out there more and kind of change the direction of where we're going, both Republican and Democrat. So
there's also the, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and the doom and gloom nature of Biden's speech, I try to be a little bit more optimistic about the future. I know that there's ebbs and flows in politics, obviously, but I'm still optimistic that there can be a leader that kind of gets us out of where we are right now and kind of restores kind of this professionalism and willingness to work together in politics.
And you were going to say, Tony?
I was going to say that, there's also the McCain brand of moderate where it wasn't that he didn't have positions. Because I think a lot of the moderates that are out there that are trying to stake out this they just sort of don't want to take a stand. But McCain wasn't that way. McCain took conservative stands. He took more progressive stands. He took a stand. It's just that people trusted him that he was going to be doing what was right. And so that's the thing that's needed, because a lot of the movement on the sort of moderate middle is about being nothing. And that's not going to work. And you could never say that about McCain. That wasn't how he was. And so I'm hopeful that that type of service comes back to some people.
Well, let's talk about the modern, get back to now. I mean, we got some really big news in the race for his old seat. This past week we saw Kari Lake. Apparently, according to reports, she is going to officially launch her campaign next month for the U.S. Senate. And for let me ask you, Tony, first of all, does this help, or who does this help or hurt most right now? Ruben Gallego, who is in the race, or Kyrsten Sinema, who's not declared whether she's running or not?
I don't know. I don't know if it hurts either of them, really. I mean, I view her. She's got like only. Well, I'm trying to say I have a lot to say about Kari Lake.
You're trying to get it all over.
But
so much.
So it's, her numbers have been going down among Republicans, and so maybe now that she's announced, that'll start to rebound, or when she announced, that'll start to rebound a little bit. She still got like 90% of the vote last time from Republicans or something like that, and so I don't know that this changes the dynamic much. I do think that she is a better candidate to face for Ruben Gallego than maybe if somebody like, I don't know, Ducey ran. But even the polling shows that, he's leading in that way. And so, like, I think in a three-way race, it's going to be close. And so it's just hard to make a prediction. I'm not worried about it. I think that she is a fatally flawed candidate. I think that all of the work that she has done over the past couple of years to try and push these conspiracies aren't going to go away. She's appeared on every far right-wing network. There's so much stuff that she has said and done, and that's not going to go away. People know who she is. They rejected her before, and I don't think there's much of a chance that she can win. I really don't.
And we are making some assumptions here because she's not in this primary. When she does officially announce, Lake's not in this GOP primary by herself. I mean, Sheriff Lamb is running, and yes, I did get proof of life from the campaign the other day because I did get a press release saying Sheriff Lamb says that Biden should have visited the border. Okay,
Sheriff Lamb says, "Hey, I am here.
I am still here.
How come I'm not being mentioned by anybody?"
I know. So again, proof of life of the campaign. So he is still running on that. But Lorna, I mean, assuming that Kari Lake jumps in, she's the overwhelming favorite to win the GOP. How does this change Kyrsten Sinema's thought about jumping into a race?
Yeah, I mean, to answer your previous question, like, who does it hurt? I mean, it hurts Republicans and the Republicans' chances of actually getting that seat back, right? There's been this conversation for months now of a prospect of a three-way, general race with, Sinema jumping in as an independent, which looks like she's potentially going to do. And in that scenario, it created a great opportunity for Republicans, right? The right Republican, right, that would come out of that primary. But now if it's Kari Lake and nobody else jumps in, and like you said, Lamb, there's barely proof of life that he's running a campaign, that helps Kyrsten. It really does. And I know Ruben gets excited about it too. But again, there's a scenario though of like, okay, those Republicans who are not Kari Lake fans that fall into this anti-Trump camp that we talked about before, are they going to make that far jump to Rubin on the progressive side? I highly doubt it.
Yeah.
You know, and so if Kirsten's there in the middle, she can, you know, curry their favor, or if she's not there at all, do they abstain, right? So, again, it hurts Republicans, right? And so, you know, we still have a year or so left. I mean, Republicans can try
400 days or whatever.
They can try to recruit somebody else who can appeal more to the moderates of the party. But again, it really makes the case of a scenario where Sinema could potentially pull something off.
Yeah, and speaking of Sinema, you know, we saw this past week there was a memo leaked, quote unquote leaked or whatever.
Everyone loves a good campaign memo leak.
Oh, it's better than the non-leaked ones. You know, if you get it in a if you get it in your email as a press release, you're like, ho hum. But if someone leaks it, you're like, whoa, I got a secret. I've got the goods. But I was reading through this path to victory, the reports of that. The thing that stood out to me was that part of her path to victory thinks that she's going to get 60-70% of independents.
Yeah,
come on. How am I supposed to take that serious?
The math doesn't work. The math does not work. And you know, when McCain won his last election, he got 50% of independents.
Kelly, 54% in a two-way race.
It is. And you can't. I know that there's and I imagine people who are listening to this podcast probably know this, but independents aren't all nonpartisans. There's a big chunk of Republicans. There's a big chunk of Democrats, and then there's some people in the middle. And in a presidential race, you know, more of them will actually come out and vote. And so I think, you know, she's leading among independents, but it's not going to be that much. And I think that one thing that we need to keep in mind in a race like this in a presidential year is likability becomes very important. And what has happened to Sinema over the last couple of years is Arizona voters have decided that they don't like her. That's it. I mean, they have decided that they do not like her.
Some Arizona voters.
Well, I mean,
they don't like her. I can't speak for all of them.
Right, some. But
those in your party don't like her.
No. See, that's the thing. That is the thing. She is underwater overall. Her negatives are higher than they were, higher than her favorables. And on top of that, she's one of the most famous politicians in the country, and of course in the state. I think that people know who she is, and I think that they've decided based on the behavior of the past couple of years that they don't like her. But maybe they will because of ideology come back to her. But I think that she's in real trouble. I think she's definitely running. I mean, she spent $300,000 on digital last quarter on advertising, and so I think she's in. But I think that she's a little disconnected from the reality of the situation.
Lorna, what do you take that memo serious? I mean, 60-70% of independents. That doesn't seem realistic in any universe.
No, it doesn't. But you know, everybody comes up with their optimistic campaign memos for fundraising purposes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. It was a fundraising play, and you got people talking about it, right? I mean, hello, we're talking about it right now. Everyone's been talking about it this week. Oh my gosh, it seems like she's actually going to jump in now. And so, I mean, that's what part of this is too, right? Is to build a buzz and whatnot. So much can change within a year, right? And we've seen this happen time and time again, especially since 2016 and the era of Trump. Things that we thought before the 2016 actual election cycle that were going to be top of mind ended up being completely different, right? And so she has an opportunity to rebrand herself. She really does. I feel like a lot of the noise and the negativity about Sinema is on the federal side, right? And these like national groups that are attacking her and anti-Sinema and get rid of Sinema and all this kind of stuff. I don't know how much of that is actually resonating with Arizona voters on a daily basis, outside of us that are just like in this political bubble because we eat it up every day, right? And so she has an opportunity to rebrand herself. The campaign against Rubin hasn't even really started yet, right? Yeah. So there's this assumption that he's just going to be able to carry on and, you know, and not have this negativity towards him.
It's going to be a nasty campaign.
It's going to be very nasty. And there's going to be a lot of stuff that comes about Rubin, and his numbers are going to change too, right? And so when you have somebody who, like Kari Lake, who has a high percentage of folks that don't like Kari Lake, and then the negatives against Rubin are going to increase, it kind of levels the playing field for Sinema, right? Yeah. And so, I mean, a lot's going to happen over the next few months. Don't count her out. That's all I have to say.
I think it's difficult. I mean, the other part of the memo says she was going to get 30% of Republicans. And I think that that's a wild number, too. I think that's going to be really hard for her to do because one of the things that's happened over the past year is her numbers have dropped with Republicans. And they've dropped with Republicans because she's been so supportive of Biden's agenda. So President Biden is going to be campaigning on the exact same things that Sinema is campaigning on. And so what's going to happen?
Well, I think
that she's going to be in a tough position.
But you have a scenario now. I mean, Sinema's obviously been a lot more outspoken against Biden than Ruben Gallego, right?
Sure.
And so she's really taken up the border issue, which I think is going to be her opportunity to get some of these Republicans.
Yeah, and that's
right?
what she's mainly advertising
And so, I
on
mean,
now.
that's going to be the main thing for her. And she has a history of speaking out against Biden on the border. So it's not like all of a sudden she's going to be a flip-flopper, right?
Yeah.
For Ruben, he's in a more difficult situation because he hasn't been as vocal until him, seeing the numbers lately when it comes to the border crisis. And so, I mean, she has an opportunity, and especially if it's Kari Lake, and she is comparing herself to Kari Lake amongst these voters that didn't support Kari Lake the last go-around. There is a path. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. It's not a slam dunk.
In Arizona,
but there's a
I agree.
scenario where the stars could align.
The thing I want to say, though, is I do think that political consultants.
Why did you just look at me?
You particularly in this situation. I think that we often think
He's attacking Lorna.
we often think, and most of the time it's true, people aren't paying attention to this. This isn't going to stick. I think that the story with Sinema is different. She's crossed over into pop culture. I mean, you remember saying this a year ago, and then she was on SNL a couple of days later. People they have an opinion that has been formed about her. She used to be able to sort of buck the party and do these things, and people wouldn't pay attention. It's not the case anymore. She's one of the most popular, most famous politicians in America, and she's also very memorable. People know who Sinema is. Regular voters know who Sinema is, and they hear about all the money that these, the winery stuff and the ring that said F you, all this stuff, the thumbs down on the minimum wage. These things stick. These are sticky things. This isn't some deep policy stuff. So she thinks legislating the stuff that people actually don't pay attention to is going to be the thing that elevates her. And so that's going to be the big challenge.
No, I still disagree respectfully. I don't think if you go to the average person on the street and you say, Kirsten said, I don't think they're going to bring up the FU ring or the thumbs down or whatnot.
But they'll have an impression of her.
But if she spends the next year talking about the economy and cost of living and the things that people are actually impacting them every single day, that's what they're going to care about over an FU ring that we got reported about. God, I can't even remember how long ago it was, right?
Yeah,
so that's what's going to be top of mind for them.
So real quick, you brought up that she can rebrand herself. How do you rebrand? I mean, because I kind of side with Tony with as far as her branding. I mean, people have an impression of her when you're on SNL, when BuzzFeed is reporting on you and whatnot. I mean, you're kind of in the mainstream there beyond just politics. How do you rebrand yourself?
It takes a lot of money, and hence why there was a campaign memo that went out this week. I mean, it's really going to take a lot of money, right? And it's going to require her spending a lot of time in Arizona doing the retail politicking like we talked about earlier, what Biden is laying the groundwork to do. And honestly, it's going to take things that's going to separate her from President Biden and traditional Democrat talking points. I think you're going to see a lot more of her everywhere, whether that be earned media or her, doing more digital ads or whatnot. But it's just going to require time and money and her being everywhere.
She has been doing more campaign-style events from the Senate side since Ruben announced his candidacy. You'll see she's doing more. I mean, she went from a year where she wasn't kind of doing anything. She was kind of just staying in D.C. and doing like sort of small media stuff while she was getting all this bad press. But she's out there. She's campaigning her heart out right now. I think she's definitely running. I think any doubt that people have, if you look at her public schedule, I think you can put it to rest. She's running, and she's focusing on rural voters, white voters, Native voters.
I was just going to mention
that's what she's focusing on
rural
right now.
voters. I mean, the people in Yuma are going to care more about the stuff that she's doing in district and what's being reported in the Yuma Sun than BuzzFeed or SNL.
Sure. But it was just to the point about like the people have this impression. I also agree. Like most people don't focus on one thing, on the thumbs down or the ring or the whatever. It's just a constant impression that people get, and after a while, people just have that thought about that person. If it's negative, once people think negatively of you, as you said, it takes a lot of work, translation, a lot of money to change that impression of you. Yeah. So I want to move on now. Talk about so much happening. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you about the sports stuff that happened this week. Colin and I might hit that a little bit later. The other big news to kick off the week, Governor Hobbs just saying I'm not playing any more games with my agency picks to lead these key government departments. She's not going to put them. She's withdrawn all the people from the Senate confirmation process. She says she's not going to do this anymore. The Senate is only confirmed a handful And I haven't really even heard a whole lot of these nominees, but yet now they're screaming that she's breaking the law and being unlawful. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, Lorna. I know, you've had a lot of experience working with governors and whatnot. Well, let me get your take on this. Was this a good move for Governor Katie Hobbs?
Well, I mean, I think she and her team did the political calculus that there was going to be fallout either way, right?
Yeah.
And so, as the executive of a state, you have to make sure that state government can continue to function, right? And your executive agencies can continue to do the work that they do. And there's a lot of instability when your agency directors aren't confirmed, right? They can only serve for a year, and then you start the process again with somebody new, right? And so obviously we're getting probably in a few months close to that year mark for a lot of these directors that she named that did not get Senate confirmation. We don't necessarily see a path of when the Senate's actually going to act on some of these. We saw a few weeks ago, or even a week ago, that they denied, that they recommended not to confirm one of her housing nominee. And so, I mean, she and her team looked at what their options were, and they decided this was the best path forward for them. I think any governor, regardless of party, would have looked at what all the options are on the table in the circumstance. In the past we'd seen, mind you, we haven't had divided government like this in a while, but, when I worked for former Governor Brewer, there would be, they obviously didn't have this one committee that vetted nominees. That went to the policy committee that, for that agency. But there were times where they will hold up nominees because the chairman of that committee had some concerns or didn't agree with their policies on X, Y, and Z. And so it was becoming on us to meet with the chairman of the committee, have them meet with the nominee, do the lobbying activity, and try to get that across the finish line. Yeah. Those were few and far between. This is a more extreme situation, right? And so I don't blame her. I understand the rationale behind it, but I also don't blame, Republicans in the Senate being upset about it. This is unprecedented. So then what does this actually mean, right, for the state? And then is she legally allowed to do this? Are these... are these unlawful directors? I don't know. I'm not an attorney, but again, I think any governor in this situation would have looked at this potential option.
I would love to ask Senate President Warren Peterson, what the hell did you expect? You put a senator in charge of this committee, the Director of Nominations Committee, I think they call it DINO. I like to refer to it as the NomCom. And but the guy they put in charge of that is Senator Jake Hoffman, who literally on the first day of the session said that he was going to fight the governor's, quote, woke agenda, and that him and the Freedom Caucus down there at the legislature were going to try to stand in the way. I would love to ask Warren Peterson, consider this an open invitation to come on the show or on the podcast. I want to know what the hell else did he expect from this?
They've never been operating in good faith, and everybody's known it on this committee. They've not been operating in good faith. And so I think that if they're going to take technicalities in the law to hold up nominees just because it makes for good clicks on far right-wing social media, it's appropriate for the governor to also use the letter of the law and some technicalities to make sure that work is getting done. So when people are looking at the two scenarios, is it the person that's using the letter of the law to obstruct and keep things from happening, or letter of the law to actually serve the people of Arizona? Which one are people going to care about? I think that's the math that they took. They have not been operating in good faith this entire time. And I think that there's been a little bit too much coverage by some outlets of the idea where it's like, oh, the governor, how is she going to work with these people? They walked out of her State of the State speech, did a press conference, said they were going to sue her, right? I mean, that was the very first thing they did. They were never, ever, ever going to work with her. And so that's it. Like,
and some of those,
we got to get work done.
Some of the Republicans, they weren't upset when the same thing happened under a Ducey pick to run the Department of Health.
Yeah. No, I mean, for both the Senate with the decision to create this committee that it all funnels through and kind of slow roll her confirmation process, and then now the decision by the executive to just not name direct agency directors and do executive whatever the term is. I mean, now it's just going to change this process moving forward. Something that just used to be used to be not so controversial, right? Unless the nominee was somebody who had a controversial past, right? But something that you would never even report about, Dennis, right? And we would never talk about in a podcast. It was just, okay, check the box, you do the confirmation, moving on. Now it's just going to be completely different moving forward, regardless of who the governor is, regardless of who's running the Senate. It's just going to be a completely different process.
And I think you're right. I think next year, I mean, if Democrats flip the legislature, I think they do the same thing when a Republican governor is up there. If they hold control, I think it is a big change for Arizona.
But you bring up, I think, an important piece of important variable we need to think about here, which is that the governor's not up for election in 400 days. The legislators are. And so, like, you know, the real potential backlash isn't going to hit her, you know, maybe if they retain control. I think that, I'm not saying people are going to be, like, crazy about this issue, but painting the Republican leadership as obstructionist is not going to be hard to do for Democratic operatives in this next election cycle. It's not going to be hard to do. And I think that people will see that. They're seeing it happening at the national level too. And Arizonans want things to get done. And so I think that it's not like a silver bullet, but it's something that we can definitely use against some of these
it's
people.
just so hard. I mean, I guess if you're going to do like general messaging and whatnot, but I mean, it's just such a complicated, I mean, the average voter has no idea about these processes. You're going into the weeds. It's hard to explain. I mean, it's not going to be really on like a mail piece that goes out. I mean,
you just say, Jake Hoffman's obstructing.
And he's in a safe district. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's just like in the districts where it's going to matter, those aren't going to be the topics that Democrats actually choose to put on a mail piece or on a digital ad against Republicans.
Well, I think we're running out of time, so I do want to wrap up on a lighter note. We ask a lot of times people for, you know, pop culture references and stuff like that. So I want to ask you guys, like when you're in the middle of your campaigns or whatever your busy schedule and you're worn out and you need a pick-me-up, what's the one band, song, or album that you go to?
Oh
Tony?
my God.
Lorna?
Oh my gosh. I always end up listening to like dramatic, emo, sad music on campaigns.
Wow,
so I can't.
that's depressing.
Wow.
Yeah,
Like-
I can't even like Sufjan Stevens and things like that, right?
Oh,
like that's the
gosh.
kind of like indie crap that I listen to. I thought you were gonna say like what TV show do you stream?
Oh, that's
you
too-
know.
That's
No,
lame.
I'm not. See, you're just
That's
cooler than I
lame.
am.
Well, because this is another pop culture phenomenon that's come out the past few weeks. I listened to NSYNC, okay? And their newest song, after what, 23 years, just dropped today. So that's my pick-me-up.
It'll be Taylor Swift from now on for everybody too,
It
right?
takes me back to my preteen days when life was simple and politics didn't take over. So
I don't
NSYNC
know.
for
I always
sure.
thought high school was extremely political.
Fair, and it was dramatic. But
Yeah.
I'd go back to those days right now in a heartbeat.
I mean, high school, I mean, the legislature is high school with money.
Yeah, it is student government, especially in Arizona.
Oh, anyways, NSYNC. Check out the new song, folks. I'm not getting paid.
One
for
of us
this,
has
but
to be a
check out
lobbyist, the other one doesn't, right? You can tell when I do the things as a non-lobbyist that I can do.
All right, we're going to have to end it there. Thank you both for stopping by here.
Thank you.
All right, let's get going with our chat on the back half of this podcast. It was a great conversation.
It was.
Between Lorna
Yeah.
and Tony.
They were terrific.
Just awesome, and thanks again. And I want to thank them again for showing up here this week. And you know, want to get your thoughts and impressions, Colin, this past week. What's something that maybe stood out to you this past week that we didn't get to on this podcast?
Yeah, originally I was thinking I was just going to make some jokes about Robert Menendez,
Oh, good
New
lord.
Jersey, because I kind of
Yeah, we don't cover a lot of New Jersey politics.
We don't. But I admire anyone who can do the corruption and like kick it that old school. Like allegedly, you don't get many corruption cases that involve like gold bars lying around the house.
No. Most of the corruption stuff anymore is just like in this new era. It's just they're just out front with it.
Yes, yeah. So this was weirdly refreshing in one way. But what we have to talk about, I think, is Senator Dianne Feinstein and her passing this morning at age 90. And it struck me as kind of sad that she's sort of become a symbol recently of the age of our elected leaders and how, she has not looked at all well in her recent public appearances on the floor. And that's unfortunate for someone whose legacy is what it is. I mean, what she meant to San Francisco in the 70s is enormous. She's the one who found Harvey Milk after he'd been shot and tried to save him. She's the one that had to announce to people that Harvey Milk and Mayor Moscone had been killed, and that was insane. And then she became the mayor, and that was in a city that had just been dealing with Jonestown a week earlier.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on, and she's always been held up as someone who's done an amazing job of sort of healing that city and getting through a lot of obstacles there, a lot of really tough times. Was one of the central figures in drawing awareness and trying to get research into the AIDS crisis at a time when the national leaders, President Reagan always gets singled out for this, but really there was no one nationally who was looking at AIDS, and she, as the mayor of San Francisco, did a great deal working in that direction. So she's got a vast legacy that I think will get slightly obscured by the most recent years, which...
Yeah, I was going to say, like, thanks for bringing that up. I mean, I think a lot of her legacy gets overshadowed in the immediacy of the moment because what we've been dealing with Feinstein for the past few years is whether or not she should drop out because she's was in her late 80s, 90, a bit of ageism, talking about that, but. And to piggyback on that, one of the things that stood out for me this past week, I saw, a video with Mitt Romney and, explaining his decision on why, he's choosing not to run. I believe he's in his late 70s.
Yeah. Which I was surprised to see, by the way.
And still looks
he's a great looking
very
76,
healthy.
I believe.
Very healthy.
Yeah,
76.
looks
yeah.
Great. Anyway.
But he was asked why, and by some reporters, and he said, look, it's time, to step down and let a younger generation take the mantle and try to, build the world that they're going to be living in. And it just kind of struck me as something as like, here we are, we're entering a phase where we're probably going to see, two men, in their 80s or near 80.
The younger 77, I believe.
Yeah, running for the spring chicken in this race is 77. And Trump, running for the presidency. And there's something to that. I don't want to be an ageist, and I hope I'm not being an ageist here. But there is something to that idea that like younger people, they're going to be living in the future in the world that is built today, and whatever is the outcome of that, that's the world that they're going to be living in. And there is something to that, I think, and I think there was some interesting thoughts and that Mitt Romney gave in explaining that.
And I think it's a very fair point. There are a lot of key issues that are particularly important for younger voters, like climate change, that is it's absolutely dealing with what we're going to be dealing with in the future, and that's a future that our elected leaders are not going to be living in. So they ignore it.
Yeah,
there are the reasons why they ignore it.
Well,
but
I mean, like younger generations too, and I'm a broken record on this one. Housing for younger people right now. Right. I mean, that is something that is unattainable. I mean, we had Kurt Davis on a few podcasts ago, a few weeks ago, and when he was talking about, if you're driving in a neighborhood down a cul-de-sac and you see a house that you're in love with, and know that you'll never be able to afford to buy that, there's something wrong.
Yes, there is. Housing for young people now is insane.
It's insane, and for many of them, it's just this defeatist attitude. It's like I've got to pay off a college loan before I can save for the down payment on a home. It may not ever happen.
Right, and we have lawmakers who've probably been living in the same home
for many
for 50 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're not hit with the problem like everyone else is.
Yeah, exactly. But let's move on now.
Yeah.
Something a little bit more cheery because I'd mentioned there in the first segment. It's been such a busy week in politics, but also in sports.
Yeah,
and you and I aren't we're not scared to delve into the world of sports.
No, we can sound dumb talking about sports.
So let's just take our armchair quarterback takes to the sports here, and like. I gotta say, what a week, man! It started Sunday afternoon with an incredible victory, and by the time this drops, the Cardinals may have lost to the 49ers, but like
pretty good chance,
very good chance, but incredible victory. I mean, they beat the Dallas Cowboys in a home game for Dallas that was
solidly
played here in Arizona.
Yes, yeah, it always seems to work out that way. And we had a few weeks ago when we had Mark McClune sit in with us. we were laughing about, okay, if the Cardinals win a game this year, who's it going to be against? And I don't think any of us had Game 3 against the Cowboys. I was not sold on the Jonathan Gannon hire in the slightest when they made it. This is a team that I would think you could fairly say is not overly laden with talent.
I think that's a very diplomatic way of saying that there's not a lot of high talent on this.
And they're playing really hard, playing really well. They've been in all 3 games. There were people who thought the Cowboys were a Super Bowl team, and they thumped the Cowboys. So hats off to them. They look infinitely better than I ever expected.
I'm with you 100% on the coaching staff. I mean, I think Jonathan Gannon, I think the whole coaching staff, they got a bit of an attitude, a bit of a swag about them that I dig, and whatever they're doing, their players are playing super hard for them. They're pretty fun to watch on TV or in person. I happened to be at the game last week. I mean, they are just a fun team to watch. You know, going into the season, I was thinking like, man, this is going to be the worst season ever, and it could still end up that way.
It's one win.
To be clear,
but,
I'm not going to make any predictions because by the time this pod drops, it'll be probably shortly after the 49ers Cardinals game wraps up. Which, let's just say I'm not bullish on the Cardinals' chances there.
No. But bottom line is you don't win a game like they won on Sunday unless the players have absolutely bought in, and they've bought in.
And then real quick, I mean, I want to save the Suns for last because the Suns are the Suns.
Yes.
But the D-backs, man, looks like they're going to be in the wild card.
Again,
by the time this pod drops, if they're not in the wild card, something really terrible happened.
Yes, it would be a giant collapse. I think I saw as of yesterday, ESPN had them at like a 90% statistical chance.
Yeah,
to be in the wild card. It's amazing. I mean, that's just they're in a position where just making the playoffs is a huge victory for the Diamondbacks.
I think
and once you get in, who knows what happens?
Yeah,
but it's been a bunch of lean years. And this is fantastic. It's been a great year.
Yeah, I mean, once they get in, who knows what happens? I don't see them going too far. They could win a 3-game series, I think. Yeah. But beyond that, they just don't have the pitching staff, the starters.
There's not a lot of depth there.
Not a lot of depth there. I mean, you need today. You need 3 really strong starters in pitching to win playoff series.
Yeah,
like 5-7 game series. You need that now.
Yeah.
I don't see that with this team, but it would be a huge victory for them just to get to the playoffs. Considering the hopes were this year, maybe they might be a lot more competitive, win 70 games or something like that.
Yes.
And I mean they've just exceeded expectations. They've been fun to watch with Corbin Carroll, some of the newer players.
Exactly.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Great season to build off of. Yes, this is a great year for them.
And let's do it, man. I mean,
no Coyotes.
Who were they?
No, Mercury. Mercury it was a bad year for the Mercury, and the season's over. So
bad for you. You know what? Caitlin Clark, my Iowa Hawkeye girl. If we can get her,
it would help.
That would help.
It would help.
That would help. She's amazing.
Yeah.
End of an era.
Yeah.
DA.
Yeah.
Gone. Your thoughts? He's a polarizing figure.
I mean, so my initial thoughts, honestly, were the Suns absolutely got fleeced on this deal.
Whoa.
I've backed off on that.
Okay.
I'm a little less. So I'm a big NBA guy. I've got League Pass. During the season, I'm watching 2 or 3 games a night.
And you went to college in Oregon.
I went to college in Oregon. I lived in Oregon for 10 years. My wife grew up in Oregon. Yeah. She's a huge Blazers fan.
So you watch a lot, yeah.
I probably saw the Blazers 50 times last season.
Yeah.
Yusuf Nurkic ain't it.
Well, it's not like the Suns are trying to bring in somebody to, flip their fortunes. They got their guys.
No, they've got their guys. But, and for all of Ayton's flaws, and God knows Ayton's got flaws, he's a better player than Yusuf Nurkic. He's better defensively. As much as his offensive game is infuriating to watch, his refusal to get physical, his move always being the turnaround fadeaway thing, so he doesn't run into anyone. As aggravating as that is, the guy was putting in like 20 points and 10 rebounds a game.
Yeah.
And Nurkic, you're going to get like 14-9.
They don't need another score.
They don't. They don't need another score. They need a rebounder. They need a physical guy on defense. And Nurkic can do that. I don't think he's as good as Ayton at that. And so, anyway, I thought they were getting fleeced, and I was focused too much on that.
Yeah.
And it ignores the fact that they brought in 2 solid guys for the bench, and it was a bench that was put together exclusively with guys on a league minimum.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I'm not going to pretend I'm happy that Grayson Allen's on the roster. I can't.
No.
I'm not going there.
And for those who don't know, Grayson Allen is one of the more hated players in the NBA.
Yes. A title he earned when he was still in college, tripping guys at Duke.
Yep.
He's not a beloved figure. But the reality is he can play.
Mm-hmm.
He can shoot. He is a solid bench contributor. There were times when he was starting for Milwaukee on a very good team. So it's an addition. And Nazir Little can play.
Well, here's my prediction. Is that Ayton is going to go to Portland, and he's going to put up big numbers, much bigger numbers in Portland. And he's going to be the kind of guy that puts up great numbers for teams that don't do well.
Yes.
That's what I think of Ayton. He's got an enormous amount of talent. You said that maybe he's not as good as a rebounder, defender, as Nurkic is not as good a defender or rebounder as Ayton. But, Ayton could also just quit on you.
Yes.
That was always the job. And I think this is what it came down to is they didn't trust him. This team, this organization right now, they say, we need to win now. And that's what we're going for, and we don't trust him in the clutch when it matters.
And it should be said, teammates in Portland loved Yusuf Nurkic.
Yeah.
Lillard loved him. Great team guy, gets along well. If you give him a certain role, he'll do the role and he'll do it to his best. And that was the criticism of Ayton, and clearly the other players.
And the other thing is, maybe you'll leave it at this, but the other thing I was concerned about, was it a smart move to participate in a trade that sent Lillard to the Bucks, and now the Bucks are the odds-on favorites to win the national championship. You just made them a whole lot better.
Yeah, I still can't look past the Nuggets, who are tremendous. But yes, the Bucks are right there. The Bucks are now, I think, automatically the pick to come out of the East. I think the Bucks got better, but Jrue Holiday, who they gave up in this, is a really, really, really good player. Mm-hmm. So they got better, but I don't think they got wildly better. I think a lot of this for the Bucks was they needed to show to Giannis Antetokounmpo, we're working. We're doing what we can to put the best team around you, because he'd made noises like if they weren't, he may want to leave. And this is the biggest splash they possibly could have made to make a commitment there. But yeah, the Bucks are the best team in the East now.
All right, man. Anything else you want to hit on there? I mean, we've got, as we're taping now, we've got new news on arresting the Tupac Shakur murder.
Me too. What, more than 25 years later? I believe it was late 90s.
It's 25 at least.
Yeah.
25 years.
Yeah, I think it was 97, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, and I mean, we've gone through this entire podcast without talking about the shutdown because.
Oh, yeah, it's important to note. Yeah, we didn't touch that with a 10-foot pole because we don't know where that's going to be by the time this pod drops.
Yeah,
on
we
Sunday
record
night.
on Friday morning, drops on Sunday night. Who knows?
Anything happens with that, be sure to join us next week for more Politics Unplugged podcast.
Yeah, we'll be here.
All right, see ya.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, the Google Store, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. See you next time.